You didn't click on this video because you don't know what Deltarune and Undertale are, but just in case. The guy who made the Earthbound Halloween hack and the best song in the Homestuck soundtrack kickstarted a game called Undertale. The Kickstarter did moderately well. Then the game came out. It did moderately well. He's been working on a sequel for a really long time, this guy, and it's out. Or rather, just over half of it is out. The sequel's title shares a shocking number of similar letters to the original. Wonder if that was intentional. I ought to do a video on the Halloween hack. Caught up? Cool. Undertale is pretty deservedly known as a modern classic. It's Minecraft levels of influential. If I said, most influential games of the 21st century, Minecraft, Dark Souls, Undertale, you could absolutely disagree, but it sure wouldn't sound weird. Its sequel has been in development for some time and has been coming out episodically. Which means that you can simultaneously have extremely strong and well-informed opinions on how the game plays, and its story, and its soundtrack, and yet live in a world where no one has actually beaten the game. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm sick of waiting. I want to judge this thing now, and more importantly, I want to know if it's any good as a sequel. I think it's time to answer the question, how does Deltarune stack up against Undertale? Spoiler warning for Undertale and Deltarune from here on out. Deltarune is a sequel to Undertale. Comment down below whether or not I'm correct about that. I want to know where, fundamentally, they differ. What are the big differences between the two? There are two I can think of off the top of my head. The first is that Deltarune is an episodic game, where Undertale was just one big fuck-off game. And the other is that Undertale didn't have Undertale to reference. But when I say those are the big ones, what I mean is that those are the obvious ones. There are significantly more foundational differences, and they make themselves apparent when the two are examined individually and juxtaposed. Come back in time with me, to a magical year called 2015. Undertale had just been born, as had most of its current fanbase. Undertale is... Undertale is a linear RPG, though I might go so far as to say that its RPG elements are fairly lacking next to its existence as a gunless bullet hell game. In fact, what Undertale most represents in its structure is not an RPG, but an RPG town. The ability to walk around, speak to lots and lots of people, and engage not in turn-based combat, but in real-time combat that pauses and waits for you to get ready every so often. Truth be told, it's a fairly unique format that maybe didn't feel as unique as it is because we stopped trying to put it in its own unique box once we got the message, RPG, it's one of those. You play as a child tasked with exploring and escaping a world of monsters. In the pacifist route, at least, the pattern of encounters is this. You meet somebody new. You present them with a new conundrum regarding their existence in relation to themselves or others. Their story concludes. You move on to the next person, with each subsequent encounter being with someone at least slightly less inclined to protect you than the last. Don't believe me? You would have to trick Toriel into seriously hurting you. Papyrus intends to seriously hurt you, but then doesn't. Undyne intends and has the capacity to seriously hurt or kill you, but can be persuaded otherwise due to being good-hearted. Muffet intends and has the capacity to seriously hurt or kill you, and isn't morally inclined one way or the other. Metaton intends to kill you because he's programmed to, both by Alphys and by the reward system of television ratings. Asgore intends to kill you because he believes it's the right thing to do, is morally compelled to, despite the fact that you're watching his heart break as he tries, and often succeeds. And Flowey intends to kill you because Flowey wants to kill you. It's actually beautiful in its scaling of danger versus intent. I believe this is part of why Undertale is likely as revered as it is. It has a universally agreeable message.
Betty has gone too far. Killing is wrong. And bad. There should be a new, stronger word for killing, like badwrong or badong. Yes, killing is badong. From this moment, I will stand for the opposite of killing. Gnadab.
but treats it with increasing severity and stakes. An idea being subject to greater scrutiny over time, just as a person being exposed to greater danger over time, is so ingrained in the human experience that in the absence of this pattern, we start to conjure it ourselves in dreams. Paraphrasing Joseph Campbell anyway. It's refreshing to see an idea we take for granted being put through the ringer. An idea unexamined is a useless idea, and by the end, the struggle to maintain a dedication against hurting the people around you makes its accomplishment all the sweeter. But the cart is now distinctly before the horse. Keep in mind that Undertale is about the people you meet along the way, and your interaction with them. It's the story of the world around you and the ideas that you represent. That extends into the genocide route as well. You represent a violent threat, and you are exposed to people increasingly powerful and increasingly ready to risk their lives to stop you. Obviously, the point is not to glorify genocide, though I'd argue that the pacifism route doesn't really glorify pacifism, at least in name either. Labels off, Undertale is about seeing how the world reacts to you. This much can't be denied. As for subjective opinion, Undertale is paced like a well-oiled machine, moving pretty deftly from beautiful scenario to beautiful scenario, never getting too boring. Except in my opinion for the last 2 hours, which are a slog. All the give a fuck was drained from me by the time I got to the Asriel fight, I'm sorry. Deltarune is... Deltarune is a linear RPG. What's more, it's significantly more well-equipped to actually call itself an RPG than Undertale is. There's some stat management, strategic choices out of single-fight puzzles, items that work better in some situations than others, but it's still just as linear as Undertale, in fact more so, likely due to its episodic nature. Deltarune is the story of Chris, who, by the way the story progresses, you'd think was the new kid in town, but just isn't. It's not a criticism, it's just a feeling. You, presumably, are Chris, or at least something that's controlling Chris. Your bully, Susie, and you find your way into a dark world where the objects and items of the banal world around you turn into living, breathing creatures with lives, ideas, and conflicts. Almost an homage to the Chronicles of Narnia or the Never-Ending Story, Deltarune gets genuinely close to inspiring the same amount of awe and creative potential as its predecessors. I find myself wanting to get wrapped up in it, wanting to return to its strange, whimsical worlds just as badly as its characters do. I've also gone on record saying that a game's character motivations and desires lining up with the ultimate motivations and desires of the player is typically a good thing. Unless you're doing a subvert your expectations a la Spec Ops: The Line. So it might come across pretty easily. I like both of these games a lot. I'm a bit of a contrarian, but I can't begin to pretend that I don't think Undertale and Deltarune are the bee's knees. Especially the writing. I consistently find something so refreshing about Toby Fox's unique brand of modern humor. Relying on absurdity underscored by casual millennial acceptance, but without the toxic streak of irony or self-aggrandization that results in being too good for tropes. Dare I even pull out the clips? Here's a fun little mental exercise. Undertale and Deltarune feel unique, don't they? Yet they indulge, entirely sincerely, in so many overused tropes it'll make your head spin the moment you think about it, because, and I want to make this clear enough to ring out as one of my core beliefs about writing, you can't overuse a trope. You cannot, through usage alone, cause a concept of storytelling to sour. I'm not talking about predictability. Obviously, anything on the planet can be done to the degree of inspiring the human mind, trained as it is to spot patterns, to spot an obvious pattern. If you're turning into Hopsford's Mystery Theatre for the 19th week in a row, and the mysterious murderer has been the butler in as many episodes, then yes, you've overused a concept, not a trope. Throw the viewer off the trail once. Make it the dying millionaire once, and then execute the butler trope well afterward, and you can very easily indict the butler 20 more times with the audience shaking in their seat with anticipation during every episode. Guys, the world lost their minds for the one episode of House where it was finally lupus. A trope, a construct of storytelling, not just an attribute of a story like female protagonist or a genre like sci-fi, handled well and in the right hands, is evergreen. If audiences tire of it, it's never been through repeated handling on an expert level alone. In the same 5-year period, The Dark Knight, The Avengers, and Skyfall, huge movies each of them, all had antagonists who intentionally allowed themselves to be caught by authorities, and it didn't bother anyone. Some people, dorks like me, may have noticed, but I don't recall hating it, and I don't recall other people hating it. Then, the much-reviled Star Trek Into Darkness happened, where Khan, yeah, that's supposed to be Khan, spoiler alert, and my deepest sympathies to the late great Ricardo Montalban, pulls the same thing, and all of a sudden it's a trope people have a problem with. Yeah, not because it was overused, but because you fucked it up. Toby Fox knows this just as well as you and I do. Better, probably. Or we likely wouldn't have that boss fight length allusion to the hero's journey, which by the way was my favorite part of episode 4. All this to say, Deltarune is significantly more by the books than Undertale. It's a classic story, and if you think it can't be compared to Peter Pan, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, or the heartbreakingly great masterpiece of a children's novel, The Phantom Tollbooth, then it doesn't mean that Deltarune is a class of its own incomparable snowflake of a story. It means that Toby Fox did his job. He breathed new life into something you already know perfectly well. The two big points I'm getting at are, A, Deltarune is actually pretty standard as far as storytelling is concerned, and B, I hoped to phrase that exactly in such a way as to not come across like I'm insulting it. Quite the opposite, in fact. It's remarkable that a talented writer can take that which we already know and still infuse it with such creativity that it feels new again. I'm floored. It's remarkable. But it does make it difficult to compare with Undertale. For all the comparisons I have already made, the two stories are shockingly different. Deltarune isn't all that unique compared to humankind's grand traditions of storytelling, but it is exceptionally unique compared to Undertale, which was less an escapist fantasy than it was a study on how one must exist in a world that seems to, with age and experience, care less and less and less about whether it hurts you or not. So how does it stack up? It doesn't. And not because it's too early either. The subsequent episodes of Deltarune would need to betray its entire structure and already established storylines in order to eventually resemble Undertale. Deltarune is about a kid traveling through a world. Undertale is about a world presenting itself to a kid. Chris is significantly more characterized than Frisk is, and Chris benefits from deeper relationships with the game's main cast. While Chris's story may gain depth and profundity in the coming chapters, it's evident that its core is that of a children's fantasy in the tradition of Roald Dahl. Undertale is a vignette story, many unique characters coming into contact with a force they were unprepared to deal with, be that powerful love or powerful hatred. So they don't stack up, not really. They're structured far too differently to compare, like they were episodes of the same TV show. The character writing, art, gameplay, and music may present them as sister stories, and they are. But they're more like sisters who went in two different paths in life and then came back looking like two different Pokemon evolutions of the same young woman. And also, they sound weirdly similar. Oh wow, they really are related despite the wildly different experiences. And, just so I'm not clickbaiting you, you want to know my personal subjective opinion on how they compare on a, call it, quantifiable level? Undertale feels a little more like a cohesive whole, while Deltarune kind of varies in quality. Episode 1 drags a little. 2 is phenomenal and so goddamn funny. 3 is a slog, despite strong character writing. And 4 had me on the edge of my seat the entire time. Where Undertale feels roughly the same quality the whole way through up until the very end. And I mean the real end. Undertale ends like 4 different times before the credits roll. Editor Jordan, what are your opinions? Oh. Ooh, that's a hot take. I don't know if we can leave that one in. Alright, calm down, buddy. Oh. How insightful. Thank you for your thoughts. Obviously, we can revisit this topic once the full game is out, but for the meantime, I'm glad to have gotten my thoughts out on the strangely incomparable nature of these two games. No one was mentioning how weirdly different they are, so I'm glad I got the chance. What's more, now I get the chance to hear what you think. Maybe you think they're more comparable than I do. Maybe you hate my more subjective opinions, and of course criticism is always welcome. Maybe you want to fuck the fish lady. Bad taste. Bad. But let me know anyway. The engagement is always helpful, and I also want to hear your actual thoughts. Leave them down below, and thanks for stopping by.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's revelries are ended. If you enjoyed the video in any way, all we ask is for a humble subscribe in the tin can currently being passed around. On the screen before you is a list of our patrons who have decided to donate their hard-earned coin. And you may visit us after the show if you wish to join our steadily growing list of patron supporters. I hope to see you all again soon, and thank you for stopping by.